Welcome, community. I am Aaron Avila. I'm 12 years post-brain aneurysm stroke survivor. Welcome to Stroke of Genius podcast, Survivor Experience. Have I got a special show for you? I've got what I consider a friend of mine. His name is Tom Broussard, and he is a stroke educator. He's also an expert on aphasia. And we want to remind you that June is raising aphasia awareness month. So we are very excited about kicking off this month, aphasia awareness month together. So let's bring Tom on the line.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Tom Broussard.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, bro. How you doing, Tom?
Good. It's nice to see you.
It's great to see you. It's been a while since you and I worked together, so it's really great to see you. Really,
it's true. It's been several years.
Yes, it has. But I wanted to start off by let's kick off Raise Stroke Awareness Month. Is this month in June, and we only have 30 minutes together. It's gonna go by so quick, so I'm gonna jump into it. You ready?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to jump into some questions that you and I talked about that what I could do. Let's start since it's a Raising Aphasia Awareness Month. Let me ask you, what is aphasia? Explain to people.
Sure,
Wait. First, please introduce yourself first. I'm getting
sorry. I thought I was just some lump over here. It didn't matter who I am.
Yeah, no, it's no. That was my mistake.
No, not at all. My name is Tom Broussard. I had my first stroke 11 plus years ago. Lost my language. I was a dean at a college outside of Boston. Could not read, write, or speak well. Obviously lost my job. And it took several years to be able to get better and have this conversation. But that's basically who I am today. Now, obviously, learned a lot about aphasia. Didn't know what else to do. Not unlike Aaron, figuring out a way to move forward, doing something that helps other people. Studying aphasia and helping people understand about aphasia was my new job. It's my only job going forward. But when it comes to aphasia and what is aphasia, and there's a lot of different ways to further explain it, but basically it is a language disorder that typically is from a stroke. There can be other things. You can be hit by a car or a horse or any number of things that would, and I actually met a person who actually fell off a horse and got hurt, and he got aphasia, believe it or not. But the real issue about it is that because of all of these impacts, basically, it ends up destroying a large number of brain cells up here. And as a result of that, that's how those brain cells work to allow us to do everything we do, including communicating. And unfortunately, it destroys those cells, and it then damages the connectivity that they have. You can even think about it as a telephone, cord. They are broken, and they can't get from one place to the other. The interesting thing about aphasia is this particular kind of aphasia is that you can get better based on lots of things, and we'll talk about that later. But you really can get better and rebuild all of those wires so that they come back together and let's language start to work again. So that's what aphasia is, and that's how it can get better, depending on lots of other issues, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, so Tom, everybody says what is known out there is really aphasia did not hamper a person's intelligence, right?
That is true. We have a saying called "We've lost our language, but not our intellect," and that too is an interesting thing that's needed by everybody to understand. That when we lost our language, the brain is still there. It's still thinking. It understands what's happening. But unfortunately, because you can't express or you can't really understand what's being said to you, that becomes part of this dialogue with other humans that are no longer there, and that is how it becomes quite an invisible disease, because you're basically alone, and that's really the issue. You're alone, so you can't go to the restaurant and ask for food. You can't talk with your husband or wife or your kids for the same issue because they know that you can't talk with them, and that becomes terribly, terribly bad.
Yeah, you and I discussed an agreement before the show about the isolation that occurs with aphasia. It's actually terrible enough as a stroke survivor. And I know many aphasia people, the inability to communicate isolates you and makes you withdraw even more.
Right.
And, you know, that brings me to this question. How can you get better from aphasia? Can a person overcome this hurdle, this ability?
It's always a yes and a no to all of these kinds of questions because it so much has to do with who you are and who you were before, and how severe you are as a result of the stroke, and then what's the environment around you. So again, if you have a great, really good supported family, that helps a lot because they have the patience, because you need a lot of patience to talk with somebody who really can't express. But if you are supported that way, then that helps you get better because the interaction. Not that I've already said we can't say what we want to say, but there still has to be an interaction because that's the way the brain works. I mean, the information comes in, you try to say it, it comes out wrong. You write it, it comes out wrong. It is the act of doing those things that does let you get better. So it doesn't matter how bad your writing is. It doesn't matter how bad your voice is. The more you say it, that's the repetition component about how the brain works. That's how you make the habits that we all have. If you keep doing those things every day, all the time, with a purpose that, oh, if I do these things, I'll get better. Because what used to be bad, like when we were babies, we just to babble. And eventually that babble becomes something that is known to the people around you. That is the way the brain wires it in a certain way, but it needs the input. And it doesn't matter how bad it is, it's the input on a regular basis that allows it to grow and change so that now you can express what you couldn't express before. But again, given these different factors that I mentioned, including the environment, which also is very difficult to get by if you don't have supported family, friends, or almost like an AA, finding somebody who is willing to be patient with you going forward, to work forward to make this work.
So what you're saying is that mistakes, if their speech is not perfect, the effort to try to make it to work is part of that learning of neuroplasticity or learning to retrain the brains of what you're saying.
You're absolutely right, Aaron. I mean, I've known you for several years. I can tell that your voice is getting better. I know that. It's not magical, but it has an awful lot to do making it look like it's magical because people get better almost without really knowing it as long as they do these activities, which is what you do on a day-to-day basis, right, Aaron? That's how you get better because you're talking, you want to talk. So you have to have the motivation that makes you want to talk, knowing when you first start, it sounds awful. But the fact is, because you can hear it and you know that it's awful, the way the brain is designed, the brain can tell what's awful. They actually have a model of what you used to say, right? the brain knows that. There's a place in your brain that actually saves your voice on the inside. Now you say it wrong. Well, what do you think? The brain is so powerful, it actually compares what you said today against the model that you've always had. And it keeps doing this. Oh, 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 oh. And eventually you start to, quote, get better, because that's the way the brain works with this incredible millions and billions of cells that happen to be built that way. So yes, you can get better, again, given all these other things we just discussed.
Well, Tom, you and I have done shows together in the past, several times. But I think part of it is clicking for me as far as this show goes, as far as really tuning into don't be afraid to make the mistakes, because the mistake is part of the learning process. And Sherry Patterson is out there, and she's a sister that has aphasia. And, I can see, and I know my own life as a stroke survivor, the way I am, that your inability to express yourself correctly cause you to isolate or turn recluse. And by doing that, we're taking away the natural learning of the brain, which is it learns from the mistakes. What you just told me, I've never heard before, which is your brain keeps a memory of what you sound like, how you speak, and you the only way to get that to start firing is to make the mistakes. So, it realize you're doing something wrong. And it's going to be about it. So it's so exciting to hear.
Yeah, it's true. We all know this word feedback. But when you say something that's wrong, the feedback comes because you say it, it comes around and goes into your ears. And then it goes inside. Again, the brain is incredibly powerful, and it can start to compare. It can tell. And because of the way it does things, it shaves off what was bad, making it less bad based on the feedback. So the more you say it, the more it starts to shave it. So it's actually starting to look like it used to look like. So that is how it works. The other side is, unfortunately, now really back to what you had said now and in the green room, the people who don't have the environment that they need, maybe had difficult experiences even before, and after the stroke, because and very severe, after all those factors that are really hurting you, people unfortunately use this thing, and it's not a good thing. It's called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness, because you basically are learning that the best thing I can do is just hide and isolate myself, never mind other people basically isolating you themselves. And as a result, between the two parties, the one in the middle, the one that's now alone and afraid, will stay there. So that really is the worst part of it all. If you don't find a way to find somebody, even if it's, therapy, or there's apps or other humans but coming through apps that can let you go, okay, it is good what you just said, Aaron. It is good that you're saying things that make mistakes, because you need the feedback, because you have this device on the inside that will start to shave it, right? But you desperately need the feedback. Even sometimes you have to, if you don't have anybody else and you're able, I mentioned it before, AA, a friend or an application that can actually talk to you and start to help you produce the feedback that you need to begin to express at some point in time.
Well, that, honestly, Tom, that is pretty much powerful for me, because, the reason my speech has improved. Now, there's a part of me that wants to be high. There are times, there's something inside of me that wants to withdraw and be recluse. But because I put myself out there doing podcasts, spitting stroke TV media, I have improved. I've been forced to improve, and I've improved because of feedback. And then you're putting words of what I've experienced. I was, as you know, I did not always speak where I can be intelligible, but I, over time, through that feedback process, which is a natural course of the brain, have experienced what you're talking about. So I want to encourage all the people out there with aphasia, get out there and talk. If somebody doesn't like how you talk, don't worry about it. I can't use language that I use to describe those people that don't like the way I talk. But let's just say I don't care. I'll still talk.
Yeah. I wrote an article about that exactly. You have to tell the public, I don't care. You
Yeah.
need to listen to me because me hearing it myself helps me get better. And I need you to listen to what I'm trying to say. So yes,
Wow,
you
that
have to be
is.
out in the public. I know it's incredibly, even before your stroke, people just don't like to talk or be a public person, but find a way that will allow you to do the shaping and the sculpturing. I'll give you a really good metaphor. I'll make it short. You know how they make these gardens that are just so beautiful and they look like an elephant and they look like a horse or whatever it might be. And they start trimming the leaves, right? And they make it look like that. Well, inside of all of those beautiful, beautiful bushes and things that have been clipped and sculpted, inside is a wire diagram. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
The wire diagram is not only the habit that you have in your brain, but it's also the habit that shows what you looked like. The brain knows that. It is the wire that holds. And if you start clipping around that, it's going to look more and more and more like the words you used to be able to express before. So there is that wire that supports the leaves, the bushes. As you clip them, that is still there for you on the inside. It is just waiting for you to clip in a certain direction, and it can tell. That's how it works. That is really how it works. You don't need to be a scientist. What I'm telling you here, you use my metaphors in my books, and you go, it's exactly what it sounds like. The scientists could tell me this. They won't tell you that because in words that are too difficult to understand, but this is exactly the way the brain works. Exactly.
Tom, I've worked with you now for a few years,
Yeah.
and you and I you never gave me that analogy. I'm done that analogy I love it. It's spot on. It's perfect. It encourages me as a yeah. I'm sure it'll encourage many others out there with aphasia and other speech deficit. So that part of that shape, the pruning, is that what plasticity is?
That is what plasticity is. The interesting thing, basically, it's an electronic shear, basically, and what it does is the plasticity only comes based on these experience-dependent activities. So if you don't, we mentioned it before, if you don't do these things, then there'll be less plasticity. Another really good metaphor is photosynthesis, which we all know. We learned it when we were kids about converting sunlight, into green leaves. Converting, right? There's an engine within the leaves that allows them to actually convert light into sugars and green leaves. Plasticity converts thought, might as well be sunlight, and cognitive activities, reading, writing, speaking, right? Converting those activities, those experiences into new brain matter. So when you lost millions of cells in your brain and destroyed them, they're gone. With them, they take the fiber, the fiber that becomes who you are, and the synapses that allows the cells to communicate. They're all gone, never coming back. The amazing thing is that the remaining cells have this capacity to grow new metaphorically branches and leaves. They're otherwise called dendrites and synapses, but they grow that. They are built for that. It's like the sun. If you think and you consider and you consider and try to do these things, as Aaron said, even just the effort of thinking about what I want to say, make it wrong on the inside, it brings in all that energy and it uses it. It does it all the time. And it just keeps on clipping. It does that for the rest of your life. However, as you get better, after a couple of years go by, you get to see, and others can see for you, oh my God, I am getting better. Why? Because of this thing called plasticity, which is just an electric shear. Really, you need these activities. That's what provides you with the energy to make all the rest of this work.
I'm loving that, Tom. I really am loving that. We have a question from the audience. I'm hoping you can take this question. How many different types of aphasia are there? Give us the main top 3 or something.
How about the top 4?
All right, top 4.
And a lot of it has to do with where it is on the brain. We didn't mention that earlier, but because of the way the brain is organized, even though the brain distributes all kinds of information all around the brain, there are also localized, what they call localization, parts of the brain that are particularly well suited to do one thing or another. So here on the left side in the temple is something called the Broca's area, otherwise called the language center. There's a lot more nerves here. I mean, there's so many nerves here that it actually bumps into the cell, so into the skull, so that after you die and they have the skull, look on the inside and you'll see a little thimble there, because there's so many nerves there, so many. And that's how Broca's area is, and that's how you can express. Further back in the brain is the wiki aphasia. That's where you can't receive. And there's a big link between the two, because obviously to be able to hear and then going over here to express, they're right next to each other relatively. But there's a big highway between the two of them. So one or the other are broken. There's global aphasia, which is clearly both of them, meaning both of these and others. And then primary progressive aphasia. Even though we use the word aphasia, it's really not the same kind as these other 3 aphasias we just talked about. Primary progressive aphasia is a neurodegenerative disease where it is destroying the parts of the cell that doesn't allow them to communicate with each other. And they eventually become with Alzheimer's or dementia as a result.
You know, what's kind of exciting for me, I'm rethinking neuroplasticity, because it ties into somebody said something to me the other day, and they were saying they can't walk. They couldn't walk. They have a hard time walking like me, and every time I'm falling, I never heard someone say this before, but falling teaches my brain like it. I teach my brain to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, we always try to avoid falling, which you should. I'm not saying falling, but the principle of doing something and getting wrong and teaching, and the brain is designed to use that input as a way to get it right eventually. Yeah. And I find that pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, what other ways our people with aphasia out there, our survivor friends, what can they do without formal therapy to improve the language?
Well, it's not unlike you, Aaron, and me too. We all had our therapy at the beginning. You typically get a certain small amount of hours, right? It almost, I don't say it doesn't matter, because it's very useful to have your therapy at the beginning, because if you're lucky, they set you on the right path. They need to do more. Writing an article should come out in a week or so, actually saying why, on the one hand, it's so helpful to have therapists, Another is those therapists need to do more to set us on the right path, which means you have to do all this after you leave me. So here's the things you need to do, right? But because once you leave after just a few hours, then you begin to realize that for the rest of your life, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands of hours, you have to live with aphasia that helps you get better by living more purposefully about the need for recovery. So that means you have to do these various activities. So that's what you have to do post formal therapy.
Yeah, okay, so now your heartfelt mission life. Now people don't really realize this now. You basically couldn't speak in the beginning when you suffered your stroke. You couldn't speak. So you are living proof to what you're saying is true, that you can recover from aphasia. But now you're also an author of books, many books. What book would you suggest? Say someone new has never really tried to tackle their aphasia. Is there a book that you suggest starting on that you produced for them, for a resource for them to maybe work with the spouse or the other by themselves, whatever? But what book would you say to start with yours?
Sure. And it's not unlike your last question, which is really, how does anybody move from being a stroke survivor to being a stroke educator, which happened to be with me, but it happens with you too, even if known as a stroke survivor, you also realize that you're also an educator when it's just the two of you, meaning the person we talked about before with your friend in AA who's helping you get forward. Well, that's your educator, right? So everybody is an educator on any given day. So in my particular case, once I realized so much had happened, which is to say so much hadn't happened, I wrote the ABCs of aphasia. Everybody, and I'll hold it up here too, everybody, when you are discharged from a hospital, you need to have this with you. If you don't, there isn't anything that they can give you that will do anything more than what this would do, because it takes you years to figure out what paperwork they give you, what sheets they give you, what websites you read. You have to do information, which I put here together with images, because in the beginning, I couldn't understand anything. I could understand images. So these are images, then they're shorter titles, and then more in information as you become more aware, as you become more of an educator than just a survivor. We both know what those two words mean. If you're just a survivor, you know what that means. If you're an educator, that's a different way of experiencing who you are still on the inside. So the images, then it takes you from there with all the information you need going forward. That's number one. Once you begin to understand more, then my fifth book, this is my fourth. My fifth book is later, after you begin to understand what you're beginning to understand going forward, moving in the direction of becoming an educator, then again with images, but you get to actually see the metaphors, several of which we just discussed today. Photosynthesis and plasticity, it's here. The conversion of one thing to another, it's here. The knitting, because you have to make up these new wires, is here. So you get to see these images and you go, oh, knitting, I can just put that up there just for a minute. Knitting, oh, you mean Tom is talking about knitting these particular fibers, and you are into what is called a network, a neural network, because on the inside, everything you see on the outside has a representation, right? A neuro representation of everything on the inside. Your word, your sigh, your act, everything you do is on the inside with the neural representation of everything you are doing. So yes, every single thing here, as you learn, then the next step is to look at the metaphor book and better understand, not only from you telling you, but then you can take that to the people behind you who are just learning about aphasia going forward. Because we need, it's an army, there's millions of us. there are not many millions of people who know about aphasia who didn't or already have it, or as a result of it. So yeah, that is the attack to make.
Awesome. I really am glad that, and for those out there that are listening, please, June is Embracing Aphasia Awareness Month. Please share this video, like, share, and subscribe to Stroke TV YouTube channel. And share the video with somebody that needs it. And help Tom and I become part of our army, Aphasia Army, and help us face Aphasia Awareness Month. But I think we've just, I can't wait to have you on again, Tom. I believe it or not, I told you it's gonna go by quick. We're down the end of the show. But how do people want to get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
For the most part, you can find me online with Tom Broussard or Aphasia Nation or Stroke Educator. But you can find me one of those ways, or of course with Aaron. I also want to tell you that, just for everybody to know, remember earlier in the show, we talked about the fact that we've lost our language, but not our intellect. It's clear to me, as a good example, Aaron has learned about plasticity. I remember years ago, he said, I don't know anything about it. You got to tell me more about it. So I started telling him about it. But now I can hear Aaron telling me from his perspective about plasticity from his experience and his newly learned information over these last several years. So that's why the intellect continues to move forward, even if you yet can't express. And clearly Aaron is one of those people who now is explaining you, yes, in words that you have to think about. You have to work on his accent, as it were. But you can say, oh, he is learning this, because I'm hearing him say, oh yeah, this is how it's working from Aaron, never mind from Tom. So yes, it is interesting the way the brain does work if we do these things and work toward being more of an educator than a survivor.
Well, I really, really am loving that.
It's true. It's true.
They're true. Yeah, now connecting the neural pathways and understanding it, that everybody out there has the ability to become an educator. Yep. And you can use what stroke does, and I'm sure aphasia, what stroke does make you kind of turn real close, trying to hide. But we're saying become an educator. Become one that makes a difference. Because you have it in you.
Right.
Your struggle can become your superpower. Tom, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun, and I'll do it anytime.
Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. Happy Aphasia Awareness Month. Bye. Set me on fire.